I'm Tim, and welcome to Weekend Watches. I finally remembered to mention that we're starting these on a Saturday, so I'm not going to wish you a happy Sunday. Your entire weekend lies in wait. Everything you see here is for sale. Prices are in the description, except when the watch has not been priced. Then it'll say email, but I'm not getting lazy. I'm not laying down on you. It's just that I don't have the information if it's not there. That said, there is a new email line specifically for buying watches, tmosso at thewatchbox.com, for your pricing and purchase questions about anything you see here and anything you see on Watchbox reviews. So let's get right into it with the timepiece that ranks as my favorite Patek Philippe of all time. This is a watch that is simultaneously nowhere near the most expensive recent Patek Philippe, but at the same time, the most interesting Patek Philippe. The 5235G Regulator, first shown at Basel 2011, not really available until 2013, and as of 2019, discontinued in its white gold form. It's glorious. The case is inspired by the vintage 3448 Perpetual calendar. You could see that in the sharply angular lugs, as well as the conical bezel and the satin longitudinal case flank. Now, the dial has a vertical satin stainless steel-like graining, and then there is a sort of opaline frosted finish underneath the minute track outboard. All of the calibration on the day, month, and date discs, as well as the sub-registers, all of the printing, it's done in blue on silver, which is an exquisite and subtle contrast. The Patek Philippe logo and the notation of the home city of Genève, that is engraved on the dial rather than printed. The watch is exhaustively detailed to the point that a vintage-inspired custom Patek Philippe buckle was created for this model, that vintage Patek script, keeping everything vintage inflected. Now, the watch is anything but vintage on the reverse side. Let's talk about what you're getting on the front side. Annual calendar, adjust only once in the jump from February to March. You are getting a regulator dial, so you have seconds, minutes, and hours, and you have a stop seconds or hacking function if you want to set the watch precisely to a reference time. Turn it over and you have a movement that was created just for the regulator, and as of 2020 is still only available in the regulator and the follow-on rose gold version of this watch. So this is the caliber 31260 REG. It is bigger than the old 240 micro rotor. That one is 27.5 millimeters. This one is 33. So it's designed to fill out the case back. It also has a different train set. As you can see, the barrel and the drivetrain with a lovely sort of finger bridge fashion, terminating in a high technology escapement and assortment. I should say, of all the Patek Philippe advanced research silicon technologies, only Gyromax SI, the silicon hybrid mainspring, or I should say balance wheel, is not present. So this has the silicon, it has the silicon hairspring, it has the silicon pallet, that is the anchor, and it has the silicon escape wheel. So it has everything except the silicon and gold hybrid balance wheel, all of which is to say it's mechanically unique. It has a 48-hour power reserve, a micro rotor, and a unique beat rate as it beats away at 23,040 vibrations per hour. It is the only watch I know of that uses that rate. Patek Philippe seal 6-position adjustment, and with the silicon hairspring, guaranteed accuracy of -3+2 per day, which is impressive stuff as it significantly exceeds the COSC -4+6. Now, on the wrist, it's an easy one to wear. My 16-centimeter circumference wrist accommodates this well. I can recommend this to smaller wrists because it's fairly narrow across the wrist. You can see I've got plenty of clearance on both sides. It's a comfortable and flat watch, only 10 millimeters thick, that easily slides underneath the dress cuff. And, of course, the finishing quality that you expect on a Patek is not only present and correct, but because of the micro rotor, you can see everything. Nothing is obscured by a winding bridge or a winding rotor. We're not done with Patek. Let's talk about what might be the most interesting center rotor perpetual calendar Patek Philippe offers. Launched in 2007, this is the 5159G. 38 millimeters, you can see a lovely guilloche dial in officer's watch fashion. It has the look of a World War I officer's watch, as oftentimes back in the day, pocket watches were converted to wristwatches, and that's exactly what this is supposed to evoke, with the look of lugs welded onto a pot-bellied pocket watch case, a little bit of a plinth underneath an onion-style crown, where we have bars that are fixed by screws rather than spring bars. So this is a very resolute and secure system that is evocative of trench warfare. Itself not terribly romantic, but it helped to give us the era of the wristwatch, as it simply wasn't possible to go to one's pocket while using both hands in the course of of World War I combat. As a result, the wristwatch became popular, and after the armistice and the Treaty of Versailles, it stayed popular to the point that by the late 1930s, wristwatches had surpassed pocket watches in sales. Now, the watch is a perpetual calendar. It has radially arrayed Roman numerals, a guilloche center. You can see there are black and white gold hands. There is a retrograding date, and then we have aperture, day, leap year phase, and month, with a moon phase and a 122-year adjustment interval for that moon phase down at 6. The perpetual calendar, unlike the annual in the 5235, this one need be adjusted only once in the year 2100. Everything else is easily accommodated by the mechanism. Now, I mentioned these were often these officer-style watches converted pocket watches, and many pocket watches featured hunter or half-huntered hinged cases, and that's exactly what we have here over a 324 automatic base. The finish here is as fine as anything you'll see on a caliber 240 micro rotor, but it is the center rotor automatic, the likes of which you'll see on, for example, the Aquanaut or the Nautilus. And you can see inside of the case back, you have both the reference number and a blindingly black polished surface that you can use as a canvas for personalization if you don't want to mark the watch externally. Now, it has a full deployant clasp in matching white gold. Unlike the Regulator, this is a full clasp watch. I'm going to wear this one upside down so you can easily see it. Comfortable watch, not as big as it looks. The lugs make it look imposing and downright enormous in isolation, but on the wrist you can see I've got plenty of clearance on that side as well as that side, and I can recommend this for a 14 centimeter circumference wrist. It's a handsome piece, and as a retrograde perpetual calendar, it's distinctive in Patek's lineup. The officer's case immediately identified with Patek Philippe. It's not quite iconic the way a Nautilus or a Calatrava would be, but it's definitely distinctive of the brand. Now let's talk a little bit about a company that was really trying to figure out what a modern icon under its imprimatur should be. We already had the Type 20 and the Marine from Breguet, but what should a modern wristwatch, dress watch Breguet look like? And in 2005, Breguet added the Tradition line. And this is the original reference, 7027. It is 38 millimeters in rose gold, and the idea is essentially to evoke an Abraham Louis Breguet late 18th century or early 19th century pocket watch in a wristwatch format. Rose gold case with welded lugs. As you can see, the bars are fixed by screws here as well. The case flank is cold rolled to create this coining and then hand finished to remove any sloppy appendage. As you can see, everything is hand finished between removing the evidence of the weld from the straight welded lugs and removing the evidence of the rolled flank. There's a lot of hand finishing externally, and that's before we even get inside. Now, the dial, though it is compact, is made of solid gold cut on a rose lathe. That's true rose lathe guilloche rendered guilloche. It is then black galvanized to create the image you see here. Breguet hands, radially arrayed Roman numerals, a watchmaker's 4. You can see this one features a frosted set of bridges and plates designed to evoke pocket watches and individual half bridges. As you can see, individual half bridges for the train, the great wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, the escape wheel, and the balance. And though the balance has the look of an anachronistic parachute shock protection system, that was Abraham Louis Breguet's pioneering shock protection invention, and it does have that, you could see this is actually a recessed nut aerodynamic balance where the variable inertia nuts that move in and out, they have actually been recessed so that they do not have as large an aerodynamic signature. It doesn't seem like it would make much of an effect, but beating away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it does make a difference. You can see there's a power reserve indicator up to 50 hours hiding in the corner at where 11 o'clock would conventionally be. And then you can see that all the wheels have been first beautifully satin finished, but they've also been cut in a fashion that resembles the wheels you'll find in vintage pocket watches and clocks. And the barrel, which sits under a half bridge at center, takes pride of place, powering everything from its centralized position. Turn it all over, you actually get a second power reserve indicator, and you can see the power reserve indicator shows you more of the mechanism that underpins the device. You can also see those same frosted bridges, and what you can't quite see is that the edge of every bridge, I'm going to try my best to show it, but you're not looking at a lower level of finish. You do get that same mirrored anglage on the edge of these bridges there. You can see it a little bit on the half bridge for the balance. It is rounded, chamfered, optically smooth. It is not just a straight cut. Even though the look is vintage, the finish is modern high horology. Adjusted in 6 positions and very accurate. It's an impressive piece. 38 millimeters isn't going to dwarf any wrist, and I can recommend this watch for any wrist. But you can see on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's nice and discreet. It's certainly extravagant in detail, but from an arm's length, it doesn't cry out for attention. It's not needy in that regard. It has a warmth, a character, and a charm that is distinctive of Breguet and distinctive in particular of this model. And you can see it wears low enough to fit under a cuff. A very special piece. One of my favorite modern dress watches, and I have to say, while my preference would be for a white metal, if you want something that is most current and in fashion now, a watch of our times would be rose gold. If you're going with the gold, rose gold is the gold of today. Now we may as well speak of rose gold in a completely different paradigm. Independent horology, we're straying away from Breguet and Patek and the large companies, and we're talking about arguably the independent. MB&F, founded back in 2005 by Max Buser, is literally him and his friends, MB&F. So the friends are collaborators who help with everything from creating the strap to designing the watch to assembling subcomponents or creating the cases, creating the wheels, creating the plates, bridges, even simply designing how the finishing of the movement will come across. And you can see on the reverse side of this one, the name of Kari Voutilainen. And the bottom line is, this is a watch of extraordinary fine finish, as it features a number of broad bevels that are chamfered, mirrored, and immense to the point that you don't need a loupe to appreciate them. At 40 millimeters, this is a wearable watch, first launched in 2014 from the Legacy Machine series, designed to evoke what a MB&F wristwatch would have looked like had it been created in the 19th century. Now, this is a very, very, very easy watch to wear. MB&F watches have a reputation for being monsters on the wrist, and that's the legacy of the HM2. Here, no problem. Kari Voutilainen may have specialized in finishing style, but MB&F aced the ergonomics of this one. They normally work, I want to say, with Eric Giroux on their designs, and he might have been ultimately responsible for the look of this thing. The bottom line is that everything is extraordinary, right down to the black polished full bridge that looms over the dial. There isn't a single indifferent detail on this watch, and you can see just how three-dimensional the dial is. You can see the balance staff reaching almost from the crystal straight down through the watch to the opposite side. You can appreciate the fact that there is a rich double-crested Côte de Genève. Look how broad the Geneva waves across this movement are. Also, look at the size of the screws that are used. They didn't need to use these giant black polished screws, but they did, and again, that's Kari Voutilainen's input right there. Now, it's a manual wind, 40-hour power reserve, big slow beat rate, 18,000 vibrations per hour. I'll bring this one up to speed while you watch. You can see it uses another modern recessed bolt variable inertia balance with a large overcoil hairspring. It is a huge 14-millimeter balance and absolutely dwarfs the sub-registers. Each of the sub-registers, by the way, is a white lacquer. You have a power reserve down at 6 o'clock, and I should say it's more of a 45-hour power reserve with a 40-hour chronometric power reserve. You wind this one a little bit quicker so you can enjoy it in motion. Powering up to speed, you could see this watch has a lot of character. It is poetry in motion. Note, too, the engraved base plate for the dial. It's simultaneously a mechanical component, as it acts as the mounting point for the balance bridge, and an aesthetic component. You can see that satin finish that radiates out like a spiral nautilus shell from the center. You can see that satin finish on the base of the dial. Again, thrown it on the wrist, it's thick at 16 millimeters, but most of that is the bubble-like crystal. The timepiece is narrow across the wrist, and again, at 40 millimeters, this is the most wearable MB&F. Now, let's talk a little bit about a couple of watches from an independent that has become more prominent, perhaps, than any other except MB&F and Richard Mille. I feel like FP Journe, Richard Mille, and MB&F are in a three-way horse race to have the absolute biggest brand in the independent space. Not the highest production, but the best brand name. And I think among FP Journe watches right now, the Chronometre Bleu is the signature. It was designed as the entry-level watch when it debuted back in 2009, but today, I cannot think of a single model from FP Journe of Geneva that is actually more in demand. 39 millimeters in blue-gray tantalum. It's one of very few watches made in this material. Tantalum is difficult to sculpt. It's even more difficult to polish. FP Journe creating the dial and the case in-house at his dial and case factories, and the dial has an incredible iridescent effect that's almost electrifying. It does sort of have the look of arcing electricity, and it's a combination of a gloss and metallic, two features that are difficult to superimpose. Now, it features off-white printing and hands, so what appears to be white on blue is more of a sort of eggshell cream. It has the tapered Journe biomorphic hands, and as you can see on the case back, it's a caliber 1304 manual wind with twin barrels, triple finish, as you have Côte de Genève across the 18-karat rose gold bridges and plates. The actual bridges are Côte de Genève. The plates, as you can see, feature engine-turned perlage and a grand doge, or a barley corn, in the gap between the barrels and the balance. And you'll see there is no obvious conduit from the barrels to the balance, as the entire drivetrain of the watch runs underneath the dial and thus shields from view any of the wheels driving the balance, creating a broad open vista. It's almost like glancing into a gleaming gold canyon, and with a tantalum case and a solid rose gold movement, it is a hefty 39mm watch. Throw it on the wrist, it's comfortable. Only 46 millimeters from lug to lug. Any wrist can accommodate this watch, and it's only 8.4 millimeters thick, so it sits nice and low. Incredibly comfortable, elegant, and in a lot of ways, the only Journe you'll ever need. This is the most famous Journe of the modern era, and if you're going to get a Journe collection together, 3 watches you want: the CB, the Res, and the Tourbillon, and you can basically put paid and be done. Speaking of the Tourbillon, what I've got right here is a recent evolution of the Tourbillon. This is what came after the original Tourbillon Remontoire. This is the Tourbillon Souverain. Remontoire d'égalité, constant force device, and of course you have the seconde morte, which is the deadbeat second. You can see the deadbeat second system, which is energized by the titanium spring, so every second it meets out power from the mainspring barrel to the escapement, so that the escapement, right down to about 12 hours remaining, is always getting the same amount of energy, maintaining constant amplitude. 1 minute tourbillon, 21/6 beat rate, free sprung, 6-position adjustment. You have a tourbillon, a constant force device, a power reserve, and a deadbeat second. 4 complications in one watch. Throw it on the wrist, 40 millimeters in rose gold. It's an elegant piece. This one's even heftier than the CB, 40 millimeters in rose gold, and similarly with a rose gold movement. It's an easy watch to wear, incredibly comfortable, but again, you do feel the heft of that for which you've paid. It's a very substantial watch. However, and I'm completing the trilogy here, we've seen the CB, we've seen the Tourbillon, and now we're going to see a Res. This is sometimes known as the Res 3. Res 3 Black Label, a watch exclusive to Journe boutiques, and also at the same time exclusive to those who have bought new watches through Journe boutiques. So that's the Black Label, originally launched in 2008 as the most exclusive regular production offering in the Journe catalog. Low numbers of any given model available per year, meaning in any given year you're likely to see single-digit productions of any given version of the Black Label, and this being the Res 3, it has a few features we associate with the Res 3. The Res 1 would have featured a brass movement and a symmetrical dial, 2 12-hour dials. The Res 2 would have featured the symmetrical dials and the rose gold case, or I should say rose gold movement. So we went from a symmetrical dial with brass to symmetrical dial with rose to an asymmetrical dial from 2010 to 2019. Now this watch is now out of production. There will be a new Res. This is the 24-hour dial, or as I like to call it, the winking watch. One of the dials features jumping hours and scrolling minutes in 24-hour format, so you can set these two separately, and you can use it as a true travel watch, because the original was 2 12-hour dials. 24 makes it more obvious whether you're looking at AM, PM, where you are. So for example, I am looking at approximately 2:35 in the afternoon right here. Now, because it is a resonance watch, these two balances, and of course a rose gold movement, but these two balances are not mechanically linked. There's a power reserve here, a mainspring barrel, 2 power trains, 2 escapements, 2 balances. There is no mechanical coupling or spring linking these. The effect of radiating parasitic losses, that is frictional loss from aerodynamics and vibration as well as heat, they radiate out and then they help to mutually reinforce. After about 10 minutes, the resonance effect takes purchase, and then if one speeds up, the other slows it down. If the other slows down, the other speeds it up. It's like metronomes or pendulums in close proximity synchronizing. It's the same phenomenon. The thing is, because it takes 7 to 10 minutes for it to synchronize, you might wind up with the second subdials running out of sync. So what you do is you pull the synchronizer over at 4 o'clock and now they are fully synced. The hours don't need to be the same, but it is symmetrical and handsome to have the seconds hand running in sync, and they will stay synchronized. 42-hour manual wind power reserve, one crown up at 12 o'clock, sets both dials and winds both barrels. Throw it on the wrist. 40 millimeters in platinum with the rose gold movement. This one is the heftiest of my three Journe. A real handsome watch. I actually like the Res 3, and in black label fashion, it might be my favorite version of the Resonance. Now, of course, there is a 24-hour dial that came out as a one-year model. That's a special piece, but I like the look of this one better. This would be my choice, and as a true travel option with the 24-hour dial, it wouldn't be a hard choice. Now, let's take a quick diversion into the worlds of more numerous watches and a more mainstream brand. Across Geneva, we head over to Rolex. Over at Point Hans Wilsdorf, right across from the bridge, you find the world headquarters. And that would be the home of the watch you see here, launched for 2019. This is the BLNR with the new 3-day caliber 3285. So you have the 70-hour power reserve here, and you also have the combination of the black and blue bezel for the first time with the Jubilee bracelet. 40 millimeters in stainless steel. The watch still features the lovely matching blue 24-hour hand. So what's changed? Well, the arrival of the Jubilee and the arrival of a new, longer-legged Chronergy escapement movement with a larger mainspring inside a thinned-out mainspring barrel. It's still 100 meters water-resistant, so though this is an aviator's watch, it is also an all-around sports watch. Automatic, fully loomed, very swimmable, and of course with the 2 time zones, this is a timepiece for travelers, this is a timepiece for pilots, this is a timepiece for people who just love a handsome and versatile watch, and it is a little bit more formal on the Jubilee bracelet versus the Oyster. There's no doubt about that. It changes the character of the watch. On the other hand, Rolex often is accused of creating watches that all look alike and have a generic appearance and ambiance on the wrist. A lot of folks in the general population can't tell the difference between this and a sub, so a little bit of visual differentiation is not a bad thing. Again, 16 centimeter circumference wrist, easy to wear, very comfortable. I'm a big fan of it. Honestly, I can't tell you which of the BLNRs I like better because I'm not a GMT fan. If you ask me which GMT, Tim, I would say a 16760, the original Coke, the original GMT-Master II. But if forced to choose between this and the Oyster, I would have to think about it. Being a movement guy, I might lean toward that one, but because I also appreciate famous firsts, I would probably go with the original Oyster bracelet watch, just because of the position it holds in Rolex history. Now, here's a watch that is no longer offered. With the blue lacquer dial, you're not going to find the yellow gold and stainless steel Submariner in cases any longer. After 2013, this dial, which was blue lacquer to match the Cerachrome ceramic of the bezel, it went back to a sunburst. People had crowed about that since the two-tone arrived in 2009, and they said, hey, we want to have the sunburst blue that we recognize from historic two-tone Submariners. As a result, the original watch with the blue lacquer dial has become something of a collector's item. You don't have to ask me which I prefer. I like bright colors, and I love the gloss blue lacquer of this particular version. Now, technically, it's exactly the same watch. 300 meters, water-resistant, 48-hour power reserve, automatic, and a chronometer. If you want to hear the bezel, and I think we should because it's a dive watch, let me hold it up to the mic. This is the creamiest and most refined bezel in the business. Only Grand Seiko gives Rolex a run for its money, reconciling the seemingly irreconcilable qualities of crisp detent and smooth glide. This has both. Throw it on the wrist, and as you can see, this is an extravagant watch, but not quite the FU finger-up flair of a full gold watch. Full gold is not an all-the-time option for a lot of folks. First of all, it's a little bit antisocial in some circumstances, and second, it is a little bit of, I don't know how to say this, but it's a level of extravagance with which some are simply not comfortable, whereas two-tone has somehow managed to be a bit more socially acceptable as an everyday option. Call it the legacy of the children of the 80s and 90s, but I still find that yellow gold with stainless steel, as well as the addition of that gloss blue, gives this watch a unique appearance, character, charm, and a sort of standalone quality. You're either down with two-tone or you're all against. Are you all in or all out? There really is no middle ground with a two-tone Rolex in yellow, gold, and steel. A very special watch, but again, a very special watch for a particular kind of taste and a buyer of a certain degree of confidence. Now, this would be my choice of the 3 Rolex watches on the table. Far and away my favorite. This is the Day-Date II. an immense mass. Half a pound of platinum on the wrist. It is 41 millimeters, but it feels like more. 12 millimeters thick. It's not a thick watch, but it is a broad watch, as the solid end-link President bracelet stretches 53 millimeters across the wrist, meaning this 2008 to 2014 model is absolutely enormous. Eyes closed, you would think you were wearing a 48 millimeter Hublot. There is just so much platinum here. Solid end links, solid center links, milled clasp, solid case back, and a big honkin' 41 millimeter case that wears like a 43. This is a statement watch, but only to people who are hip to Rolex. A lot of folks are going to look at this and think, oh, stainless steel. And that might be fine for you, because as extravagant as this watch is to those in the know, it's not going to catch the attention of the GMT black and blue or the two-tone sub we just discussed. Now, this watch used a movement only ever used in this model, and that was the 3156. So everything about the Day-Date II is special. The biggest Day-Date ever, the heaviest Day-Date ever, a unique movement only ever used in this model, and I should mention the first use of Rolex's ceramic-coated bracelet pins, only available on the platinum version of the Day-Date II. Pins inside the bracelet that were ceramic-coated so that they can never be worn down by the bracelet itself. As a result, Rolex bracelet stretch over time is effectively canceled out and eliminated, so that is no longer a question on platinum versions of the Day-Date II or any version of the Day-Date 40, and this is where it was prototyped. Now, this watch features a lovely set of blued, radially arrayed Arabic numerals, and this is a model I've not had on the show in the past, and this would be one of my first choices if I were to pick an offbeat Rolex watch, because for a lot of folks outside the realm of the Datejust and the big three sports models, it's difficult to make a choice. Do you go with a Milgauss? Do you go with an Oyster Perpetual? Do you go with an Air King? If cost is no object, you go with the Day-Date, because that will always be the president's and the dictator's watch. It is a timepiece of distinction and import, and I love the history and the lore behind that piece, even if much of it is a little bit of mythology. Now, jumping to a watch that needs no mythology because America's Cup racing is cool and fun. We have a NZL32, technically the 2007 Special Series Omega Seamaster Aqua NZL32 chronograph. Now, as you can see, it is a thumb-actuated chronograph, which is to say you actuate it like this when it's on your wrist. A 15-minute countdown system, so you get 5 silver discs, 5 red discs, 5 blue discs, and they scroll past as 5 minutes, up to 15 minutes duration, pass in sequence. First we have the silver, then we have the blue, then we have the red, and that is your countdown mechanism for timing the start of a match within a regatta. And of course we have conventional chronograph functions. Most regatta timers have limitations on their practicality as chronographs. Not here. The regatta function, you can see it there, and there are 5-minute calibrations on the minute counter, but we have a 30-minute counter at 3 and a 12-hour counter up at 12, meaning we're not giving much away to the underlying specialty of the watch. It's still a functional chronograph, fully loomed, 150 meters water resistant, 42 millimeters in stainless steel. This was designed for the New Zealand team in the 32nd America's Cup. Automatic vertical clutch chronograph, Dubois de Praz module on a chronometer certified ETA 2892A2 base. It is a lot of fun on the wrist. A versatile watch that I would describe as something of an aquatic Paul Newman based on the design of the dial. It's a timepiece that stands out, even among the Omega America's Cup Special Series watches. This is regarded as the one that pushed the limits farthest in terms of engineering distinction from the standard Seamaster models, as well as aesthetic differentiation, and the watch certainly has that. It's a timepiece that wears easily, even though it is broad, 50 millimeters lug to lug. It's got a standard footprint of a 44 millimeter watch when you include the end links of the bracelet, which are 55.5 millimeters across. So though it's a 42, I feel it wears a little bit more like a 44, and eyes closed, that would be my guess. So you want to make sure that if you have that wrist of less than 15 centimeters, you know what you're getting into. On a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, no issues. But for that chronometer chronograph, you want to make sure that you've got at least a 15 centimeter circumference wrist. Now let's jump from something that is very sporty to something that is very dress-oriented. Let's talk about the glorious Jaeger LeCoultre Duometre, a chronograph. This is the original 2007 mono-pusher chronograph built in rose gold with a frosted eggshell brown. It's sort of an eggshell brown beige dial. It has individual numbering, a series of 300 pieces with the numbering on the dial side as well as on the case back itself. You can see individual numbering on the reverse. It is an impressive 42 millimeters, 2 movements in one case as with the Resonance, but unlike the Resonance, which is just basically 2 watches telling time, 1 movement here, a 50-hour mainspring barrel for the time, and another for the chronograph. So when you double the power demand by activating the chronograph, you double the power supply. So you have the time and center seconds, and then you have the chronograph and center seconds. You have a 1/6 of a second foudroyant, or flying second for the chronograph, and a mono counter featuring the hour display, the minutes display, and then there is a single-digit minutes display. So you count the hours, the tens of minutes, the single-digit minutes, you count the seconds, and you count the sixths of seconds. A power reserve indicator for both sides of the watch. As you can see on the reverse side, 1 crown, and it is an extravagant double knurled crown, but 1 crown rotates and winds both barrels. 1 ratchets while the other winds up. Take a quick look at that crown. The logo is polished on a blasted base. The border is polished. It features double row knurling. As you can see, it features both deep and shallow knurling, and that is just the crown. The watch features welded lugs, as we discussed earlier on the Breguet, but here in even more extravagant form, as the welded lug structures are far larger, and unlike the Breguet, which is all of high polish, JLC executed double finish, welding on the lugs and then manually removing any evidence of the weld, and then black polishing the lug faces while satin finishing the flank of the case. It is truly impressive handcraft inside and out. Now, the fun thing about actuating and activating this chronograph is that you can stop it, and then the reset is a wonderful piece of theater. This is an event on the wrist. Because you double the power to the balance, there is 1 balance and 1 escapement. You don't slow the balance when you increase the power drain with the chronograph. You double the power supply, overcoming the historic liability of a chronograph, which is reduced amplitude and slower timing with the chronograph engaged. Free-sprung 21/6 beat rate and extravagant bridges in Mosso, or as we would call it in Longa speak, German silver. Nickel copper zinc with the copper giving it its golden hue. This is a movement with extraordinary depth, and you can really see the quality of the finish here. JLC has several levels of finish for its watches. There are the high complications, there are the mid-level watches, and then there are the entry-level pieces with the solid case backs. Though this watch was priced under $100,000, it features the same level of finish, right down to the Côte de Soleil exploding out from the balance that you would find on the top-end Master Grand Tradition and Ibris Mechanica pieces. A truly special 42mm watch that's about 49 millimeters lug to lug. On the wrist, it's got a lot of presence, there's no doubt. This is one of very few yellow gold watches that I love enough to wear myself. I wouldn't be self-conscious in this one because, frankly, some watches use colored gold to make up for a distinctive lack of charisma or imagination. Here, you have a watch that's simply exploding with invention and original ideas, and that eggshell dial with the yellow gold case and the substantial footprint on the wrist, all of that is equal to the sense of occasion that follows this watch everywhere it goes. Now, speaking of JLC, we do have a more practical model present and correct here. It is the 2010 Master Memovox, 40 millimeters in rose gold. This watch has everything you need and nothing you don't. Automatic winding, nicely sized, with handsome short tapered lugs, and JLC's 956 modern movement. It's their most modern alarm caliber. Throw it on the wrist, easy to wear, comfortable, and good looking. And as you can see, in rose gold, it's warm and nicely suits almost every skin tone. With a silver dial and a rose gold case, the style as well as the fit of this watch, universal. Now, I did mention the 956 caliber, which has a more vocal ringing sustain and greater volume than the previous caliber 918. Let's hear what that sounds like. And just so you know what you're getting into on the back, the image of the geosphere, symbol of the 1957 to 58 geophysical year. Today, it represents the master control test. 1,000 hours of testing for chronometry, winding efficiency, power reserve, water resistance, and durability, exceeding the COSC, and of course JLC making the entire watch case and movement. It is a loomed watch, so you can also see it at night. But If legibility is your primary concern, then you want an all-out sports watch. And in 2008, IWC obliged us. This is the IWC Vintage Aquatimer. This model, 44 millimeters in stainless steel, is designed to evoke the original 1967 Aquatimer, which shared its super compressor case with the JLC Polaris. That's why we still have the style of that original watch in terms of the dial and the double crowns for use with this reference 3231's internal rotating bezel. You can see the internal ratcheting bezel allowing you to line up the loomed index with the minute hand, so you can time an event up to 60 minutes. I find this is actually easier to read and more intuitive than a chronograph. Turn it over. This is no entry-level watch, as it featured a display case back, 120-meter water resistance, and IWC's own movement. This is the 80110, 44-hour power reserve automatic winding with a Peloton, Albert Peloton Paul-based winding system that is a distinctive engineering tradition of IWC. It's also adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer, and you can see another nod to the 60s in the tropic style inverse pyramid and cross-hatched rubber strap that is itself designed to evoke those early reference 812 Aquatimers of 1967. Though a 44 it wears flat and easy on the wrist, I can recommend this for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters, and I rarely say that of a 44. That said, if you want a sporting option that's not quite a sports watch, but certainly an all-around option on a smaller wrist, 39.5 millimeters, and this SBGM 021 would be a perfect match. Zaratsu tin plate black polished case. You could see how optically smooth and mirrored that case is. It looks black from almost every angle, and that is because it is so finely polished, those surfaces only reflect light in one direction, and you'll know when it catches. Every other angle, it will be black. And of course, we have a sort of cambered or domed box section sapphire designed to evoke vintage Seiko watches of the early 60s, and that is what this case design is designed to evoke. Vintage Seiko, or I should say Grand Seiko watches, right back to the original 6180. And you can see here there is a vintage Grand Seiko logo on the pin buckle, so they are taking that theme all the way. The movement, caliber 9S66, a GMT dual time with a 3-day power reserve, and of course you can see this timepiece easy to wear with a lush ivory lacquer dial. The indices on this dial are all diamond polished and hand finished using micrometric machining tools. So just as the case itself is hand finished using that tin plate polishing method where the case is held with hands against the spinning tin plate, the dial, the hands, the aperture for the date, the indices, all of that manually finished to create lustrous polished facets and dulled satin sides for contrast. Let's get a little bit closer, Andrew, and you can even see that the GMT hand has been fired blue for contrast on the ivory base. It is truly a special watch, and the 24-hour scale inboard of the hours has been itself printed with blue ink. Absolutely glorious, and as you can see, easily wearable with plenty of clearance on both sides of my wrist. Now, what could possibly cap an episode with so many Grail-level watches, including many of my own? Well, how about a timepiece that only came out about 6 months ago? The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar White Ceramic, blue galvanized Grand Tapisserie dial cut on a 19th century pantograph lathe, and then blue galvanized, the scarcest of Audemars Piguet's mainstream galvanized colors because of the high rejection rate. There is an aventurine disc underneath the photorealistic moon phase. We have silvered registers for the perpetual calendar indications, and we still have the polished hexagonal white gold bolts inside of the bezel. The bezel is satin finished on its top, polished on its flank. Everything that would be satin or polished on the steel watch likewise is replicated here in ceramic, all of it manually finished laboriously. It takes 9 to 10 hours to finish a steel Royal Oak bracelet. It takes 30 to 33 hours to execute the same level of finish on a white ceramic or black ceramic Royal Oak bracelet. Now you can see innocent parties have been protected here, but caliber 5134, 4.31 millimeters thick, and I'm going to flip that over for a sec so you can see it better. 4.31 millimeters thick, entirely hand finished to a standard you will not see on the 4302s, the 4401s, and the 1320s. This is a manufacture movement today because although based on the ancient Jaeger LeCoultre 920, also used by Vacheron and Patek, today Audemars Piguet builds this in-house exclusively. Even Vacheron's version starts at Audemars Piguet. handsome mirrored chamfers, black polished screws, abrasive wheel Côte de Genève, and peg wheel turned, engine turned perlage. All of that with a 19.8 beat rate, 18 karat rotor, and of course free sprung with a Gyromax architecture. The entire watch only 9.5 millimeters thick, and thus it sits low, comfortable, and light with a titanium caseback, titanium clasp, and ceramic composition. Very light on the wrist. This is as good as it gets in the world of high horology, because this is craft horology in the traditional form, executed with a modern expression and modern materials. The look, the blue and the white, is arresting. It's show-stopping. It will literally freeze you in your tracks. Ice cold for summer 2019 and just as relevant for winter 2020. And of course, you have that traditional watchmaking on the inside, both the pantograph turned dial and the completely hand-finished perpetual calendar movement. Guys, that is as good as it gets. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com, your direct line for these watches. Some of them are not yet posted. Get ahead of the curve. They will go fast. Pricing, when available, is in the description below. Thank you so much. Thanks to you. Thanks to Andrew and my crew and the guys in the controlled cab. Time out, Tim out. Enjoy your weekend, and thank you for logging on.